Latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
You're on StratNews Global. I'm Nitin Gokhale. Today on this evening broadcast, we are going to talk about the progress, even if incremental, in the negotiations between Indian and Chinese corps commanders on the Eastern Ladakh front in Ladakh, and what can be expected going forward. You're on the gist, which is our evening program. So as I mentioned, we are going to discuss about the latest round of talks, the 12th round of talks between Indian and Chinese corps commanders in Eastern Ladakh for the disengagement process and how to move forward as far as bringing back peace and tranquility on the LAC, the line of actual control, is concerned. Joining me today is a special guest, somebody who has spent more than half his life in Ladakh as an army officer, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, who was Chief of Staff of the Leh-based or Leh-headquartered 14 Corps and has served in Siachen. In fact, he's a Siachen legend in many ways. But here today we are going to discuss with him and pick on his mind about what's happening in Ladakh. But before that, I just want to recap some of the events that have happened in the past 4 or 5 months since the February 2021 disengagement process that began. If you can have those, the timeline and the visuals there. So the 12th round of talks that happened on Saturday, 31st July, was the 12th round, which took away, had some takeaways, which had these points where disengagement has been agreed upon on the PP-17, the 17 Alpha as they call it, 17A. The next round will focus on the remaining friction point, which is petrol point 15, which is between Galwan and the petrol point 17 Alpha. Depsang, which is to the north, as you can see on the map, and Demchok, which is to the extreme south, are legacy issues which predate the current crisis, which began in May 2020 and therefore will be taken up separately, is what the agreement has been between the two sides. Sources are telling us, although the press release that came on Monday, that is yesterday, does not specify these processes or these steps. But from our sources, we have learned that the next step is to disengage from petrol point 17 Alpha or 17A, which comprises both Gogra and Hot Spring areas in a way, and PP-15 will be the ones, the friction point will be taken up later. But let's also look back at what has happened since February 2021, when the first disengagement took place in Pangong Lake, followed by the disengagement of the tanks as well as the armored vehicles and the face-to-face deployment on the Kailash range. So this was the date when the engagement began, February 10, 2021. The next day, or within about 4 or 5 days, it was confirmed from both sides that this is what has happened. And then, of course, it took a long time to have the 10th and 11th round of talks between the two sides. Those talks finally culminated in what happened on July 31st, which is what was the 12th round. Now, if you look at the disengagement process, as I said, the armored elements disengage first, and then all the permanent and semi-permanent structures that the Chinese had erected between finger 4 and finger 8 on the Pangong Lake were removed, and all the landform were restored to what was there before May 5th, 2020. But that's the process which is slow, which is deliberate, but that's the way the Indian and Chinese negotiations pan out, even in the past. This, of course, is a much more complicated process because of the magnitude of forces involved on both sides. And as you can see, this is the signature that was put by both sides on the thing, and the tanks then started disengaging. The PLA tanks moved away, and then India removed the tanks and took them to their permanent locations. So incremental progress is what marks these negotiations. But let's ask General Kulkarni when he joins us. There he is, General Kulkarni. If I may ask, your first reaction to what happened on July 31st during the 12th round of talks?
Thank you, Nitin, firstly for inviting me over. I think it's a very good feeling. A good feeling in the sense that you find that when you talk, something will definitely emerge. And that is the first indication. And when these kind of talks do take place, they have a certain amount of, the trust deficit that otherwise exists between the two nations tend to solve, I would say, a little bit of it does dissolve. And more you meet, the more and more you interact, the more and more you find that a kind of the disengagement that we all are looking at will soon happen. But otherwise, again, if I may say so, that after the third round of talks that had taken place, which actually resulted in some amount of disengagement, both at Petrol Point 15 and that is at Hotline and Gokhale, and subsequently, of course, from that eyeball to eyeball that was there, that had gone to about 2 kilometers between the two sides. The ninth round of talks that were very important, the February talks of 2021, that is what is the turning point. The alacrity with which the Chinese disengaged, there was a tremendous amount of hope that they would follow it up subsequently, leading to disengagement, followed by de-escalation, and then peace and tranquility that would exist otherwise that we've been aiming for. But again, as I said, probably it may be for the first time, if I can look back, that something was put to paper is the ninth round of talks. Otherwise, it will only be talks. There's nothing been on paper. But the ninth round of talks seems to have put things on paper to say that this is what they will do, and they did it. They moved back from finger 4 to finger 8. We moved back to our Dancing Thapa post, and things are now, as luck would have it, I've just returned from Ladakh trip. I drove up to Pangong, so I came back, and I did find things are peaceful. Thousands and thousands of tourists everywhere in Ladakh is indicative of things being peaceful, and I sincerely hope that it continues to remain so. But now, after the 14th July, where the foreign ministers met, the things have now taken a turn for the 12th round of talks. And this 12th round of talks, which again I was quite hopeful that some amount of disengagement would take place, though the joint press statement does not talk very much other than wanting to continue with these talks and leading to better, I would say better situation prevailing along the LAC. But yes, there are indications of the disengagement at Gokhale. And that's quite a good sign if the disengagement takes place at Gokhale. And then subsequently, that you rightly brought out, the incremental thing. Maybe the next round of talk might bring in hot spring. Then maybe the next round of talks might decide on Depsang, on Demchok, like that. It takes long. And if you take back your mind, Nitin, Sundarong Chu took almost a decade before anything could actually be done. And here, if we can do it in few months and maybe in few seasons also, I think it would be a big achievement.
Indeed. In fact, that's what I wanted to point out and also tell our viewers. In fact, we can take questions from them as we go along. The fact is that when it comes to India and China and the border negotiations, it's a very painful, tortuous process in many ways. You pointed out rightly the Sundarang incident. Even for the first disengagement in February 2021, it took 9 rounds. Let's not forget that from the disengagement from Pangangso, then the disengagement at Kailash range, and subsequently on the north and the south bank, whatever the remaining points that were there, the time taken was 9 rounds and almost 11 months, not 11 months, but about 10 months. So that process must be adhered to. because one, of course, it is the language issue is there, where you have to interpret, translate, and do all that. But also, I think this is the first time, as you mentioned, that India has insisted on a written document, and I think the Chinese are also now moving slowly, because they want to test India's resolve as well as India's preparedness. You just mentioned that you went to Ladakh just recently, just I think maybe a week or 10 days ago. I must tell the viewers before I ask you the question that you've done a very good deed. I think you have donated through some CSR effort, the corporate social responsibility effort, some goggles to about 2,000 troops, both officers and men, which will be helpful in the high altitude areas and also very intense heat. So, congratulations for that. But what is your view on the way forward? Now, if the next round talks about PP15, should India be then satisfied with having restored status quo ante, or then India must ask for something more?
See, the first step, of course, Nitin, is the status quo ante April 2020. However, the status quo ante April 2020 does not include Depsang, because that's something which has occurred a little before all these incidents have taken place. But notwithstanding, at least as a first step forward to be able to develop some kind of trust and faith, which otherwise seems to be lacking, would happen. And if that happens, April, that is, getting back to status quo ante, April 2020, a first step. However, that should not be the end of it. We must ensure that Depsang must be resolved, Demchok must be resolved. There should be no friction point. If there are friction points, unfortunately, these friction points will not lead to good relations between the two countries. And that is something which is very important. We are neighbors, and neighbors can't afford to be indulging in these kind of lack of trust between the two nations. Therefore, it's very essential, very important that all the friction points, there should be disengagement. After that would be the de-escalation, and once the de-escalation takes place, then of course talks for peace and tranquility. In this, I would only recommend and suggest that the Chinese must adhere to what they finally decide to put their pen to, because the earlier agreements of peace and tranquility, we have something like 65 PP points, and all that we are talking about is petrol point 15, 17 alpha, all of which we can go in for patrolling. But notwithstanding that, what I find that our delegations that are there also now has rep of the MEA, and that's a very good thing, because we have our rep, we have the rep of the MEA. That means we have the China study group and also the DMA, the Department of Military Affairs of the CDS, both jointly working together, and therefore the decisions can come there and then. There is nothing that they need to look back. Everything is there. It now is important for the Chinese now, because I understand that the equivalent of the corps commander who comes from the other side, from Chinese side, has been coming regularly for almost 7-8 years, and that's quite a long way. He understands, he's very confident of what he's talking about and what it is all about. And what you rightly said, the biggest problem obviously is the language, because everything depends upon the interpreter. And of course, we also have our interpreters. We know what he's trying to convey, but it makes a lot of difference if you understand each other. And right now, I think it couldn't be better. What I could see and what I can feel, or what I can get to understand, there is good camaraderie, there is understanding between the two sides, and I think that is being seen now in the 12th round of talks, because the 11th round of talk was very, very disappointing. Very, very disappointing. The words being used, be happy with what you have got at Pangong. So it's something not expected, and especially the way the 9th round of talks led to the disengagement. But then I think now with the 12th round of talks, things seem to be coming back on the track, and both the Chinese side and we seem to be understanding, accepting that de-escalation is only possible if the disengagement takes place, and that would only lead, and the Chinese have understood that probably the Indians have taken a stand that if the border is not peaceful, the relationship between the two countries cannot move forward. And I think that
Indeed.
is itself enough indication to China. Yeah,
Indeed, like you have said, and I think like our viewers are now posing some questions. One of the positive developments apart from the 12th round negotiations and the disengagement at PP-17A is also the establishment of a hotline at one more point between the two sides, which has happened in Sikkim now. And therefore, there is a desire on both sides, it seems, to keep the communication going, if nothing else. Here, somebody's asked this: why not? Uh, why are more hotlines at much higher level not established, and can they serve as a higher purpose than what's happening now? There was a proposal, if I remember correctly, but you can correct me, Jan Kulkarni, that there should be a DGMO level hotline, but there is no equivalent of a DGMO perhaps on the Chinese side, and therefore that hasn't progressed really well. But you can tell us more about it.
What happens is the hotline is definitely one of the steps which can lead to a kind of peace and tranquility. We have a hotline at the DGMO level with Pakistan. Even though we had hotlines and things have sort of whatever that little ceasefire seems to be accepted by the Pakistanis along the LOC is because of the hotline discussions that took place. We have hotlines, even at other places. At Bumla also, I remember, and if you can recollect, Nitin, how we would be, at Bumla. But I can tell you a very nice incident that happened. Because of the heavy snowfall, the hotline had broken. And then we would wave a flag, which, to be able to attract the attention of the other side. They did come, and then we discussed what was required. And they were saying, no, the hotline, the lines are broken and nothing can be done. I just proposed to them. I said, don't you worry. I can lay the hotline right up to your position. Would you want? I'll just start. And I told my men, come on, let's go and help them out. They said, no. We'll handle it.
Please don't.
And sure enough, the very next day, the hotline was in place.
Exactly. So, in fact, if you see what Pulkit Singh has been asking, I think you have partly answered the question. He's saying, what does the hotline look like? Do we use smartphones now, or are they phones made in China? Clearly, this is no smartphones here. These are old landline kind of a phone that is used between the two sides. But that is where I think the basic structure of communication happens on the border itself. But there is one comment by Ma Tara, one of our viewers, regular viewers, who says that with all due respect, I think General Kulkarni is too optimistic about China's disengagement from Ladakh. It regards India as its enemy and is undermining it in many ways in different fields. Well, we know that, but General Kulkarni, briefly, if you can respond to that comment.
See what happens, what Ma Tara is talking about, definitely. So after all, China and India are neighbors, number one. Number two, they're old civilizations. Number three, they've actually become neighbors in the context of neighborhood when Tibet was not a kind of a buffer between India and China is only after 1950. With that, now Chinese being a neighbor to us is very, very essential when both of them are old civilizations, both of them on the way to progress, both of them by the time China becomes number one, as they are looking at it by 2050, we would be number three in the world order. If that be so, and we are no less than anybody is concerned, obviously we cannot look at any country. We have to be prepared. There is no denying the fact. Capacity building takes time. Intentions can change overnight. And to prevent intentions from changing overnight, we have to be prepared, ready, and have adequate amount of deterrence to ensure that intentions don't change. But capacity building takes time. Yeah, Nitin.
No, that's true. That's true. But I think one other viewer has already responded to the comment by Matara, where S. Modi has said that these discussions can't be carried out in anger or based on a linear kind of a thing. So, which we agree. So, there's a good interaction between our viewers in the chat box. That is how this program is designed. There should be interaction between different people and between us and the viewers. So there is another comment here that despite bitter episodes, we seem to have miscalculated. I think, there can be two views about it. You cannot miscalculate every time, but you have to understand that the Chinese if they didn't adhere to any of those agreements that you mentioned, General Kulkarni, and therefore the incident in 2020 happened. So I think we now know that the Chinese have no intention to honor some of these um, agreements or pacts. But therefore, we are building. I think India is building infrastructure, building capability, as you mentioned. I think the other fact that all of us have now understood in India, if not the specialists, but also the common people, that the PLA is actually the army of the party and not the nation. And I think that is the essential difference between Indian Army and the CCP, right, General Kulkarni?
Absolutely. There's no denying the fact. And therefore, for us as an army, we are apolitical. To us, it doesn't matter which party is in power. We are there to ensure the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the nation. For that is what we are there for. In China, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, is committed to the Communist Party, which in turn is committed to governing the country. So they have their own little this thing. Even if you look at it, they seem to be thinking that they have been mandated from heaven. And that mandate from heaven, the Communist Party of China seems to be thinking that now they are mandated to govern. And as things are going, they would be able to do 100 years very soon. If that be so, definitely there is a lot that we need to do. And there are a lot, even if you look back even during Deng Xiaoping's time in 1979 took place with Vietnam, it was with the view when the PLA was not considered or was probably asking for more. And at the time when Deng Xiaoping was not too sure, he said, okay, let's see if anything could be done in Vietnam by you. And you know what happened in Vietnam. So there is a lot that the Chinese have to answer. But then, whatever it be so, the PLA is loyal to the Communist Party and the Indian Army is loyal to the nation. They stand
and to the Constitution,
territorial integrity, the sovereignty of the nation.
Absolutely. So one final question, General Kulkarni, as we come to the end of the program, what do you foresee in the coming few years? I think disengagement, disescalation, will all that will happen, say in due course in Ladakh itself. But what should be India's overall strategy in dealing with China? One thing is for sure that by doing what they did in Ladakh in 2020, the Chinese have lost the trust of the 1.3 billion people in India. So now what next?
See, we cannot trust China because China is expansionist. Chinese have their perception of being the center of the universe. We have to be prepared. All said and done, we know the map of India. We know what actually and legitimately belongs to India. And that is the thing which is the sore point. Because even if you look back in 1950 and subsequently by 1955-56, the complete road to Aksai Chin and the occupation of Aksai Chin is indicative of what the Chinese think about what they perceive as their Tibet is concerned. And with that as a backdrop, I don't see. We have to be careful. We have to be vigilant. There is no question of trusting anybody on these issues. Talks can carry on. If things can be restored to normalcy as they were predated to April 2020, so be it. But vigilance is a must. China cannot be trusted. And therefore, as I've been always saying, capacity building takes time. Intentions can change overnight. And to prevent those intentions from changing, we have to be vigilant. We have to be prepared 24/7, 365 days. No question. The stronger you are, you will prevent war. Because China believes in negotiating from a position of strength. And that strength we have today in terms of tremendous amount of, I would say the kind of josh that the people in India have, the Indian Army has, the commitment that the troops have, as you rightly said, we are committed to nation, we are committed to the territorial integrity. And our troops are very much used to this kind of high altitude. And now you find that the Chinese Han population may be finding it difficult, leading to Xi Jinping looking at Tibetans for being enrolled into the PLA with a view to be able to help them at such difficult terrain. So they have their internal problem, and we must not get complicit, whatever it may be.
Sure.
I think
very,
be complicit.
Very well
we must
said.
Be prepared.
Absolutely, General Kulkarni. Only through strength will come the deterrence that is required to keep China at bay. And of course, make sure that they do not indulge in any misadventure or any mischief on the line of actual control. Clearly, the last word here has not been said. The border dispute, is not going to be settled in a hurry very soon, given what the Chinese have done. But thank you very much for your time, and thank you, viewers, for joining in such large numbers on this discussion on our daily evening program from Tuesday to Thursday, The Gist, which is our live show. We do take questions there. So do keep watching, do keep firing questions and comments. We welcome them. And of course, keep subscribing to our YouTube channel and follow us on our different social media handles. That encourages us, that gives us strength, and that, of course, keeps us on our toes. So until the next time, it's goodbye.